Hi, I'm Eric. I'm with DR Power. I'm here today to do an unboxing and assembly of the molded cart bed series leaf and lawn vacuums, which are the Premier, the Pro, and the Pro XL. To start, we'll need to unbox the pallet. So we'll take off the top cardboard piece and we'll set it aside. We'll then want to take out the wood slats from each corner. There's one in each corner. With the wooden slats removed from the corners, we can now take out the cardboard inserts. With those removed, we can now take off the side. With all the sides and top removed, we can now take the box and place it on the ground. It's usually nice to have a helper with you so you can help put this on the ground. The next thing we're going to want to do is remove the power unit off of the pallet. The power unit is held by two screws in the front and back, which will require a 9/16 wrench and a 9/16 socket. With both bolts removed, the power unit can now be completely disassembled off of the pallet. You can do this either two ways, one with a helper and one if you want to attempt it yourself. To start, we'll show you how you'd remove it with a helper. So first, you'd position the power unit as far forward as possible. Then with a helper, you'd lift up and bring the wheels back and set it on the floor. The second way is if you want to attempt to remove this yourself. First, you're going to want to remove the jack pin and lower the jack so that the tongue becomes off of the support. Next, you'll want to kick out this support. With the block removed, you can break apart the cardboard sides, push the power unit forward, and then roll, turn, and roll it off the pallet. Next, we'll want to remove everything out of the cart bed that's loose. We can take out our hose and set it aside, our wheels, for the Premier model, you'll only have two wheels. And our chute. With the loose hardware removed from the bed, all we need to do is cut the one zip tie. Now that the bed is loose, it's always nice to have a helper to help take it off of the pallet and onto the floor. The remaining two items will be your handlebar and axle, which can be removed by cutting the remaining zip ties. One in the front, and one in the back. With everything removed from the pallet, it can now be discarded. Next, we're going to remove everything out of this large box, which is all the hardware you'll need for the collector assembly. I'm going to lay it all out on the floor just to make sure everything's accounted for. Now that everything's out of the pallet, I've laid it out on the floor. The next step is to install the axle brackets, the axle, and the wheels onto the cart bed. So I've flipped the cart bed over to give me better access, and now we'll locate the hardware we need. The hardware that you'll need will be 3/16 by 1 3/4, 4 bolts, 4 nuts, 4 washers, and 2 cotter pins. The first thing you'll want to do is install one of your axle brackets. You do this by lining up the holes to the frame, sliding your 2 bolts through, and fastening the nut on the other side. We'll leave these loose until the axle is fed all the way through. We'll repeat on the other side. With both axle brackets now installed, we can now slide through our axle. Keep in mind, having things loose helps to align the axle. Once the axle is slid completely through, we can now go back through and tighten up our hardware. To tighten up this hardware, you'll need a 9/16 wrench and 9/16 socket. Either a ratchet or an impact driver will work. With your axle now installed, we can now put on the wheels. For the first wheel, we're going to make sure the valve stem is facing in. Slide it over our axle. In between this wheel, we're going to put a washer. The second wheel, we're going to want the valve stem facing out. With this wheel on, we'll follow it with a washer and your cotter pin. In order to secure the tire, you're going to want to take a pair of pliers or vice grips, grab on to the cotter pin, and spin the axle in each direction. With the wheels and tires now assembled, we're going to want to flip the cart bed upright. With the cart bed now upright, we're going to want to install one of the two gas springs. To do so, you'll need to lift on the dump lever, pull the cart bed up so you can see your ball studs. With the ball studs now exposed, we can install the bottom portion of our gas spring. This portion will have the tube. These just snap in to the ball joints. With the bottom portion of the gas spring installed, we'll then install the top half, which is the skinny part of the gas spring. Again, lining up the ball to the stud and pushing it in. Next, we're going to install the foot assist. This feature is only found on the Pro and Pro XL models. It does not need to be installed on the Premier. In order to install this, we'll need 2 carriage bolts and 2 nuts that can be found in your product pack. In order to install the foot assist on the Pro models only, first we'll need to remove these 2 nuts using a 1/2 inch socket and ratchet. With the nuts now removed, you can now install the foot assist. Again, this is for the Pro models only. You'll bring the foot assist up to the cart bed in the orientation as shown. You'll line up the exposed studs, hold it up, and finger tight back on the nuts you just removed. With the foot assist freestanding, we'll now want to install the 2 new carriage bolts through the cart bed. So you can drop them in through the square holes, making sure to align through the foot assist on the other side and drop down flush on the bed. When installing the nuts, we want to make sure we hold these bolts down on the bed, that way they don't spin on the square hole. With your carriage bolts in place, we can now finger tight our nuts. Again, keeping our thumb on the top of the carriage bolt in the bed to make sure the bolt doesn't spin. With all 4 carriage bolts now in place, we can come through with a 1/2 inch socket and tighten them down. Again, making sure to hold the back side of the carriage bolt. With your foot assist now installed, we can close the bed and latch it back down. I step on the frame, put my hands on the cart, foot on the foot assist, pull it down, make sure the handle is latched in place, and now we can move this out of our way. Next, we're going to install the chute, which will require 4 bolts, 4 lock washers, and 4 washers, which can be found in this bag. The order in which you'll install will be the bolt, the lock washer, and the washer on each of the 4 bolts. With your hardware and chute in hand, we'll approach the power unit. This is a manual start machine, but for electric starts, you'll have to remove the keys. That'll be zip tied here. Because we don't have that, we can simply install the chute. Keeping in mind the orientation should be as shown, with the chute moving away from the jack stand. With the chute in place, we'll want to install our 4 bolts and washers. On the other side of the chute, you'll see 3 holes. For the Pro and Premier models, we'll use the outermost holes. For the Pro XL, where the exhaust is a little bit closer, we'll use the 2 inner holes. Because this is a Pro, I'll use the 2 outermost. In order to fasten these down, we'll need to use a 1/2-inch wrench or socket. The next thing we want to do is join the power unit to the cart bed. In order to do this, we'll take our remaining 2 bolts and nuts from this pack, as well as grab 2 clevis pins and hairpin clips from the product pack. In order to join your cart bed to your power unit, you want to align your square tube to your channel, lift up, slide the square stock in place until your holes line up. When they do, slide in your clevis pin out the other side and secure it with your hairpin clip. In order to install your second clevis pin, we're going to want to chock the power unit. It's usually helpful to have a helper at this time. He will pull back on the machine to align the holes. You'll then slide your pin through the other side, and again, put another hairpin clip on the other side, and it'll be secure. We then will want to drop in our bolts through the top and the back of the engine, and put your nut on the bottom side. The second bolt you'll drop in on the front of the machine. Again, putting the nut on the bottom. We can now come through with a 3/4-inch wrench and socket and tighten these up. So next we're going to be installing the inner link assembly. In order to do this, we'll need to grab 2 carriage bolts, 2 washers, and 2 nuts from our product pack. We'll start by positioning our collector frame against the wall in the orientation as shown, with the 2 pins facing in towards each other. This inner link assembly will go in the back here. We'll start by sliding our carriage bolts from the outside in through the square holes, one on one side, one on the other. We'll then want to put our washer on top of that carriage bolt on both sides. And now we'll be ready to install the inner scissor link. We'll now take our inner scissor link assembly and we'll remove the retaining link. We'll bend it up so that the 2 ends are now close to each other. We then will take this scissor link with the jogged end facing us and assemble it onto the first carriage bolt. We then can take our second link and put it over the other stud. With the inner link assembly in place, we'll come back through with a 1/2-inch ratchet. We'll tighten down the nut. Oh man, kidding. Keep in mind you'll want to put your finger on the back side of the carriage bolt so it doesn't slip. We'll want to get this tight, but not too tight that the scissor link can't move freely. I've now laid the canvas out on the floor. What you'd want to do is to make sure the front sleeve is in the front as well as the rear flap is towards the back, and your mesh is on the floor with your side flaps tucked in so you can expose the side retainers with holes which we'll be feeding hardware through. The first thing we're going to want to do is install the side retainers into the canvas sleeve. You can see the side retainers along the side because there's 5 holes as well as an opening to slide the retainer through. In order to ensure the correct side retainer is chosen, we're going to need to check it on the frame. So for this first one, we're going to be installing the left side retainer. And so I'm going to take both pieces, which are different, and I'm going to go up to the frame. I'm going to try to align the pieces into the slots of the frame. This piece, the studs don't align with the slots. This piece, we'll see, aligns to the slots and sits nicely flush. So this is the piece we'll be installing in the left side retainer. With the correct orientation side retainer selected, we're going to line it up just as it was on the frame, slide it through. It's important to tilt this at an angle so that the studs don't catch as you slide through. Then when it gets in place, we'll rotate it back through the holes. When tilted, all 5 studs will come through the holes. With the left retainer installed, we'll now install the right retainer. It's always good to double check that the orientation is correct. We can again do this by lining it up with the frame and the slots to confirm it does fit. We'll then take it in that same orientation and slide it through the sleeves. There we go. Again, you want to just make sure all 5 studs are going through the hole in the orientation as shown. At this time, we can grab our enclosure hardware from the small box and take out the nuts we need. In order to install the side retainers, we'll just need to grab the 10 1/4-20 nuts. So with both side retainers installed into the canvas and your hardware selected, we're then going to pull our frame into our canvas on the floor. It's helpful to lean this up against the wall because now we just pick up one side, align our studs to the slotted frame, feed our studs through the slot, and secure finger tight on the other side. It is really important to leave these finger tight because that way it gives the canvas more area to move while you stretch it. I've spun the canvas around and now I'm doing the other side, which is the same thing. You lift up the side retainer, you align your studs to your slots, slide them through, and again, put your nuts on, finger tight. So next we're going to install the outer link assembly, which can be distinguished with these L brackets. And in order to do that, we'll refer back to our enclosure hardware. We're going to grab 4 5/16 to 18 by 2 1/4 inch bolts, 4 washers, and 4 nuts. We'll start in this back corner. And what we want to do is we want to align the holes of the canvas with the holes of the tube frame. We'll feed our bolts through the tube frame and out through the canvas. We'll do this on both sides. Again, it's important that the nuts on the side retainer are loose because it allows for some adjustment to getting these lined up. So now we'll line up the other corner. I've opened up the canvas a little bit more to give us more room to work. On top of each of these bolts, we're going to put a washer, 4 in total, 2 on each side. With the washers on, we're now going to grab our outer link assembly and bring it over. we're going to take the jog link and we're going to put it on this side, as shown. We can take our two nuts and put them on finger tight. That way we don't lose our assembly. We'll do the same thing now for the other side. So now the back link is assembled. So next we want to pull the canvas's front corners to locate some holes which we'll be aligning eventually stop bracket hardware. So to start, we'll grab our 4 small bolts from our enclosure hardware, as well as we'll grab 4 thumb screws out of the thumb screw bag which can be found in your product pack. So now at the front of the canvas, we're going to do the same thing similarly to what we did in the back, where we pull the canvas over, align the holes to the tube frame holes, feed our bolts through and through the holes. We'll do this on both this front left corner as well as the front right corner. You may need to tug the canvas around in order to get all the holes to line up. When the bolts are through, you can very loosely put on the thumb screws just to retain the bolts for now. Next, we're going to slide in the front retainers into the canvas. You can find these in your small parts box. We'll take both out, as well as we're going to want to grab 4 more thumb screws from the thumb screw bag. So for the first retainer, we're going to want to slide it in through the back side. It'll go in. We're going to have our studs come through these 2 holes. So you fold the canvas out of your way, you take your retainer, you slip it in the hole in the back. You can still tilt your studs, slide it through. So that both studs come through each hole. With both studs through each hole, we'll just want to loosely put a thumb screw on each stud. That way they don't move around on us. So now you're going to want to install the retainer on the other side. Again, it's best to face the studs in, slide it in, and then when you get both studs in, spin it to locate the holes. With each hole located, we can put our thumb screws on. Next, we're going to install the hinge tube assembly. We'll need to cut the zip tie to free it up, as well as grab 2 hairpin clips from our product pack. So in order to install this into the canvas, we're going to want to climb into the canvas as I am. We're going to put the innermost holes into the pins on the frame, as well as make sure the eye bolt is on the ground surface. So with the one side located now up and on the innermost hole, I then will take my hairpin clip and I'll slide it through the pinhole on the other side. That way the piece is completely retained. We then will move to the other side and do the same thing. With the tube hinge assembly now installed, we can actuate the hinge, being sure that the stud goes through the slot and that the eye bolt goes through the canvas. We can then take a thumb screw and tighten it down so that way the hinge is completely secure. The last thing we need to install on the canvas is the split hinge, which will use 3 remaining bolts and 3 remaining nuts from the enclosure hardware. And then the hinge themselves comes tied together with a zip tie, which we'll need to snip. I use snips, but you can use scissors. You can lay these 2 pieces out. You can see that they join together in the middle and have the same end pieces. With the 2 pieces laid out in this orientation, we can put the first bolt through to join the 2. Secure it with the nut on the end. And using a 9/16 wrench and a 9/16 socket, we can tighten it together. Don't over tighten. We want to still allow these hinge members to hinge. Now we can bring it over to the canvas. With the hinge assembled together, we want to make sure the rolled portions are facing up. And we take this end here and we're going to feed it through the canvas flap into the inside of the canvas. And we're going to line up the rolled hinge with the inner hole. This hole is an adjustment point. If ever the canvas becomes loose, you can go to the outer hole to make it tighter. But we're going to start with the inner hole. I'm going to drop my bolt down into the other side. You can thumb tight the nut underneath. With the right side of the hinge in place, we can now remove the thumb screws to expose the studs of the retainers. We now can feed the studs through the holes in the front of the hinge and loosely tighten them back down. We're now going to do the same thing on the other side, feeding the hinge through the canvas, aligning your holes, dropping your bolt down through, finger tight the nut, and remove the thumb screws to expose the studs again. And now feed the studs through the hinge and put them back on the other side. With the front hinge now installed, we can push it out of our way. We can go to the front corner, and we're going to now install our stop brackets. We can put them on oriented as so. Tighten down with our thumb screws. And for now, we'll still leave these finger tight. We're going to go back through and tighten everything once everything's on. We'll repeat on the other side. Now that we have everything assembled to the frame and canvas, we can go back through and tighten up any hardware we left loose. I'm going to start with the side retainers. I'm going to be using a 7/16 socket and an impact driver. I'll start from front to back. I'll have 5 on each side. Next, we'll tighten down the front hinge on both sides. For this, we'll use a 9/16 socket and wrench. We'll do this on both sides. Next, we'll tighten down both stop brackets. We'll use a 1/2-inch wrench on the back side, holding the nut, and thumb tighten all the way tight. We'll do this for both the left corner and the right corner. Next, we're going to want to tighten the back scissor link, and we'll do this using a 1/2-inch deep socket and a wrench. Start from this side, and then we'll go to the other side. Next, we want to jump into the canvas and make the inner scissor link. So if the scissor link is too difficult to push down with ease, what you can do is you can remove this middle bolt and move it to an adjustment point, this other hole, to make things a little bit easier. By doing this, you'll see it's a little bit easier. When tightening, using 1/2-inch wrench and socket, just get it tight enough so that the piece is retained, but still allows the scissor link to move freely. You then can slide the ring link over and lock the scissor in place. We now will move to the back of the machine, where you'll have a scissor link as well. The same thing applies. If you have difficulty making this scissor link and straightening it out, we've provided adjustment points to make it a little bit easier. I'll show adjusting this scissor link to make the scissor link a little bit easier. So I take this bolt out, put it in this hole, move the scissor link up, tighten it back up, and now you'll find the scissor link is much easier to do. You still want a tight fit to help with performance. That's about as tight as you want. You then can take your Velcro and peel it back to cover this linkage and prep for the handlebar installation. Take the Velcro off, peel it around, stick it back down to conceal the scissor link. Next, we will install the handlebar on the back. There are 4 slots that you line up with the 4 bolts sticking out. Lining up the handlebar, you can take 4 thumb screws found in your product pack and tighten them down so that the handlebar is fixed in place. We do provide you extra thumb screws just in case you lose any of these in the process. The last thing you'll want to do is slide the batten into the rear door flap. You can undo the Velcro at the very end. Slide your batten through. And Velcro the end closed. So now that the canvas is fully built up, we can now lift it up and place it on the cart bed. For this, it's usually recommended to have a helper. When you get the collector on top of the cart bed, you're going to want to align the rolled hinges to the cart bed as seen. Once everything's aligned, you push the hinge together, and now we'll slide our hinge pin through the rolled hinge to secure everything in place. The last bit of the hinge pin you can tap with a hammer. And then you can secure with a hairpin clip on one side and one on the other that can be found in your product pack. With the collector now on the cart bed, we can remove the cable from the impeller housing. And attach it to your eye bolt. With the cable now installed, we can install the last gas spring. So now we'll release the dump lever, keeping our foot on the foot assist, tilt the cart bed back, come around to the back, lift up on the handle, to expose the entire bottom of the bed. And here we'll install the second gas spring. To install the last gas spring, first we want to loosen the ball stud using a 1/2-inch wrench and a 13mm. Loosen the ball to give us a little bit more freedom when installing the gas spring. Now that it's loose, we'll go and attach the gas spring. So now we just pop this gas spring on the stud with the larger diameter tube at the bottom and the skinny tube at the top. Click it in place. And the last thing you got to do is tighten back up the bottom. Now you can close your machine. Making sure the dump latch is engaged. Next, we're going to want to cut this tube into 2 pieces. So what we'll do is we'll mark it with a marker. So in between the 2 ring clamps, we're going to mark a line across the rib and then start cutting all the way around the clear part of the tube. This will show you where your cut will be. First, we're going to snip the black line across the rib in which we've drawn. We're going to use wire clippers to snip that. Next, we're going to follow along our line with an X-Acto. With your 2 pieces cut, you can now remove the coupler from one side. If you need to loosen this to get it out, you can do so with a flathead screwdriver. Take the coupler, place it in between each piece. Again, we're going to want to loosen these ring clamps with a flathead screwdriver. The goal is to position this rivet on the other side of the ring clamp. That way it doesn't escape. So first I'll loosen both sides. With both sides loose, I should now be able to fit the coupler underneath the ring clamp on both sides. With the rivet on both sides, I can now tighten back up the ring clamps. With the coupler in position, you're going to want to make sure your rivet is on both sides of each ring clamp, and then you're going to want to tighten each ring clamp on both sides. So now that your hose is cut and your coupler is in place, we can attach the hose to the impeller. We bring it up, fit it snug against the impeller housing. Tighten down the ring clamp so it's secure. The last step to secure the hose is to take your rod support, feed it down through the bracket, take your bungee cord, attach it to the rod support by sliding it over the rod. Sliding one end over the rod, the other end will loop around the hose and back up around the rod. The last piece of hardware you'll need is your hitch pin and a rubber washer. So you can slide your rubber washer over the pin, drop it down on your hitch, and leave your hairpin clip on it until you're ready to tow. Lastly, you can pull the sleeve over the chute using the handles. This concludes an assembly of your leaf and lawn vacuum system. If you have any additional questions, you can refer to your manual or visit our website. Thank you.